Today on Hebrew Book Review, I'm doing two systems by Edna Amir Coffin. Lessons in Modern Hebrew and Encounters in Modern Hebrew. Welcome back to Hebrew Book Review. I'm Sapir, and today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be actually reviewing two separate book series. One is called Lessons in Modern Hebrew, and the other one is called Encounters in Modern Hebrew. And it's really hard to find information on these, but I am 99% sure that Lessons in Modern Hebrew went out of print and Encounters in Modern Hebrew kind of superseded it. They are very, very similar. They basically cover the same topics, use the same format. It's just that Lessons in Modern Hebrew is really, really old. And to the point that it was using, they used a typewriter to type everything out, and I'll show that in a minute. But basically, they are the same. They're basically the same book. If you see both of them, because I do see in all kinds of bookstores, online bookstores that sell used books, that Lessons in Modern Hebrew is still available. If you see them both and you're debating between one and the other, I definitely recommend Encounters in Modern Hebrew. It's the newer one. It's going to have a little bit more updated vocabulary, and it's not going to be so painful on the eyes. So here we go. Here's a page that has a lot of Hebrew on it. You can see it is just a horrible, horrible typeface. Now, full disclosure, when I was in college, this was my book. These are notes that I made back in 1990 from being in class. And at the time, it was really probably one of the very few modern Hebrew books. But nowadays, it's really, really old-fashioned. I definitely don't recommend getting Lessons in Modern Hebrew at all. But if you do get it, then besides whatever I say about the typeface, probably most of what I'm going to say about Encounters in Modern Hebrew applies to Lessons in Modern Hebrew, because they are basically, Encounters in Modern Hebrew is just a little bit of an updated system to Lessons in Modern Hebrew from what I can see. In my 2 years of college study of Hebrew, we only used level 1. It took us pretty far, although I do remember getting out of college and feeling like I still could barely speak Hebrew. And it's true, I could barely speak Hebrew after the first level of this book. Almost everything I'm going to say from here on out will be about Encounters in Modern Hebrew, because I purchased that book, or I purchased this system to study with on my own after I got out of school. And so it's the one that I'm a little bit more familiar with. I did try to use it with my son as well. And spoiler alert, neither of us learned all that much with it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad system. It just didn't work for us. So let's get started. And by the way, when you look, this is the front cover of Lessons in Modern Hebrew. It is apparently sometimes available on Amazon, but it looks like this on Amazon because Amazon doesn't realize that Hebrew is written right to left and that this is the back cover and not the front cover. So if you see this, that's this book. So both of these series are intended for English-speaking adult learners. It's very clear none of them have any pictures anywhere or any color. It's extremely boring for a young person to be learning out of these books. It's definitely intended to be a textbook in a classroom where there are lots of students and a teacher who speaks Hebrew. And it does seem like the intended audience is a bunch of college students because most of the dialogue revolves around college students and their life on campus. I only went in depth in the first book, but I did look through the entire 3 books and I did not see any religious content. So I believe I'm going to give it a 0% religiosity. The font is a pretty normal font, although I would say a little on the small side. I don't even think it's a 12 point. It might even be a 10 point. It's very, very small. So the book teaches cursive writing in lesson 1 of the very first level and then never uses it again. Most of the book is written without nikud, and when there is nikud, it's with kativ maleh, which is excellent for adult learners. We have no need to learn the traditional spelling. We just need to learn the letters that we are going to need to write when we are writing like adults without nikud. So before using either of these series, the Hebrew learner really does not need to know anything. So both of the systems teach the cursive at the very beginning. Lessons in Modern Hebrew teaches it as an introductory lesson, so kind of like a chapter 0, and Encounters in Modern Hebrew does it in lesson 1. Both of them are horrible. And this is actually pretty typical of any system, any series of books that is teaching the entire system of Hebrew, including all of the grammar and a bunch of vocabulary and everything. Teaching students, even adult students, how to write and how to recognize letters and how to write in print and in cursive. Now, we don't necessarily ever need to know how to write in print, but a lot of them will teach it anyway because I don't know why. A book series that teaches all of the grammar, almost all of them that I have seen, will teach the letters once, give you a few lines to practice on, and then they're off and running to do more stuff. Now, this was not a problem for us in college because we had, whenever we were reading print letters, and whenever we had to write, or whenever our teacher wrote on the board, they always wrote in cursive because that's how Hebrew is always done. And so we all very quickly got a hang of the fact that you write one way, but if you see something written in a book, it's going to be different. And we had that teacher there to show us, no, you're not making this letter long enough, or it should be up higher, or, oh, that's too round. Anything, she was there to correct us with whatever problems we had. So if you are using the book differently than what it's intended and you're just using it to learn Hebrew on your own, I highly, 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 highly recommend that you get a book specifically that teaches the reading and the writing and the letters and how to form them. You really need a separate book that's going to really show you kind of all of the pitfalls and the direction to write it, and if there are more than one stroke, which one to write first, and how to make sure this letter is not going to look like that letter. That's kind of a real niche kind of book. So super beginners, I always recommend that whatever book system series you get, that you also get a book specifically on how to recognize and write the letters. So what these books teach, if you go through all three of them, is basically all of the main Hebrew grammar that you will need to know. At the very beginning, of course, it covers how to read and write and what the letters sound like. And then it moves on to, simple phrases of greetings. And then it talks about nouns and pronouns, and it goes through, if you get through all three levels, it goes through all of the binyanim and all of the tenses, and most of the prepositions with the various pronominal endings. If you make it to the end, you're reading pages like this that are, just a full page of nothing but Hebrew. And so it definitely gets you, if you make it all the way to the end, it'll get you pretty far in your Hebrew knowledge. So this first book definitely focuses on most of the vocabulary, and the dialogues are centered around university students. They're all in various classes, and they're talking about going to the cafeteria, and the parents are coming to visit, and where do they live? They live in the dorms. And so there's, it's all kinds of vocabulary and situations that college students can appreciate. The later books seem to not be so focused on a university setting, but they seem to be young people. I was reading one lesson where there was, a morning without coffee is not a good morning at all. And so they're definitely, though, adults. And so I think about all of my son's books that are meant for kids. Of course, I'll center around kids, because that's what he's interested in, is seeing the kids going to school and going to camp and, living with their mom and dad and maybe a brother or sister. And, so these books are more geared towards 20-somethings who may or may not, they may be in college, they may have just gotten out of college, kind of that kind of people. Each lesson, each chapter, each unit usually starts with an opening dialogue, and then it gives a bunch of grammar points, also with then exercises, and then a second dialogue, some more grammar, some more exercises, and then at the end of each chapter is the vocabulary list from that chapter. This series is really good for a classroom setting, and you can see that they are attempting to follow kind of the order of cognition, where at first you're just doing really simple tasks of choosing among like 3 or 4 different words and putting them into a sentence. And then as you go along, the exercises are getting a little more difficult, where you have to actually write out your own sentences. At the very end, you have to actually make up your own dialogue and decide what would be the appropriate response in certain situations. And so each exercise is building on the knowledge of the last one. And so in that way, that's something I remember learning in school when I was getting my teaching credential, that you want to build slowly like that. You want to build up your exercises. You don't want your very first exercise to be something super open-ended, because it's too overwhelming for the students. But by the end of whatever lesson you're teaching, you definitely want some open-ended stuff, because you don't want them to only be able to insert one single word into a sentence. You want them to be able to come up with their own sentences, because that's the whole purpose of learning Hebrew, is to be able to communicate in real life situations. So the series does have quite a few shortcomings, though. Both of these are extremely old. This one was written in 1977. Now, this one was written in 1992. So I think I bought this one right on the cusp of, she was probably in the middle of writing this one. And but still, I don't think I mean, they get reprinted, but they do not get upgraded. It's not the fault of this book series, right? She wrote it when she wrote it. But it's really important to have a series that is either recently written or at least updated on a regular basis. And also, especially if you're learning by yourself, there's no stress in the word lists. So you can't tell whether the stress should be on the first syllable or the second syllable or the third syllable. And there are some rules in Hebrew, but they get broken all the time. They're really not hard and fast. And in fact, in one of these books, she starts off by saying, by showing the minimal pairs, bira, which means beer, and bira, which means a capital city. They're spelled exactly the same. There is absolutely no way to tell the difference between bira and bira, except for context. But when you see a word in a word list, you just don't know. And of course, being a non-native speaker, you don't know. You need somebody to teach you where that stress is. I wrote myself a note that it's aesthetically weird. And I mean, it really is. And this is not the only case of this. So they're teaching this is in the second lesson, so very early on. And they're teaching ken and lo, yes and no. And so the instruction kind of starts here and it continues down here and then it continues up here. And you have just this little bit and then you have an exercise. It's just, I get it that they obviously didn't want to waste all of this space and put it all up here. And if it's not going to fit up there, I mean, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit, right? The very next page, you've got a bunch of stuff written here. And then, boom, the last two are up here. So it's just weird. It's just, it's hard. It makes it a little bit hard to follow. They give you lines to write on. And it's, kind of got the workbooky feel, right? So you feel like you're supposed to write in this book, but look how small these lines are. Look at my finger and look at these lines. They are way too small. I was trying to get my son to write in there and there was no way. But even for an adult, it's way too small. They do not give you enough room. If they don't want to give you enough room to write in there, then tell the student, write this in your notebook or on a separate piece of paper. But don't give us lines that there's no possible way to actually write whatever we're supposed to write on those lines, because it's just way too small. Some of the activities seem kind of pointless. So in this case, they're introducing some Hebrew names. Israelis often have like really, really interesting names that are not from the Bible and, names that are common in Israel, but, outside of Israel, we don't really hear them so often. And so that's great. Yeah, definitely let us know. What's a boy's name? What's a girl's name? What's a intersex name? What's a last name? But then what happens is, let's look over here. We've got an activity where we're just putting names together. Put a boy's name and then the last name, and then a girl's name and then the last name. The heck's the point of that? Also, a lot of the exercises are geared towards asking your classmate something, or kind of talking to your classmates about certain things, or telling your classmates a little bit about yourself. They involve a classmate. And so if you're learning on your own or trying to teach a single student, and they don't have a classmate to share with, a lot of these exercises you just have to skip over them or just kind of pretend that they have a classmate. I mean, that can get really weird really quickly. For students learning alone, there are a lot of activities like that make you think, ugh, this is probably not the book for me. And lastly, it is definitely not good for the little ones. There are no pictures. There's too much explanation of grammar. And then also the lines are way too small. I mean, if they're too small for an adult to write in there, I mean, think of a little kid. They write huge. And I mean, there was no way. So that's Encounters in Modern Hebrew and also Lessons in Modern Hebrew. They're both quite dated, and so this doesn't mean that they don't teach you good Hebrew, but you will definitely need to update your vocabulary if you start working with these books. And I definitely recommend that if you want to use these books, you try to learn with a friend. And absolutely, you must get another book to teach you to read and write the letters so that you know how they're pronounced, you know their name, you know them in alphabetical order, because that's another thing this book doesn't teach. It doesn't actually teach alphabetical order. These books could be useful in that kind of a setting, but in learning on your own, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult. I think there are other books out there that are better. All right, that's it for today. If you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments. And also, if you have a book that you'd like me to review, leave that in the comments. Hit like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot, Papa Ama Ba'a. See you next time.